Some people seem to get lucky again and again, not once, not randomly, but consistently. This video is about the mechanism that makes that possible and why most people never notice it. If you're watching this video right now, it means a small, almost invisible shift is already happening in your life. Not a sharp turn, but that exact moment when you find yourself in the right place to hear something that quietly explains a lot. You don't need to give this your full attention. You can leave it playing in the background, make yourself comfortable, grab something to eat, and enjoy. This video isn't designed to overwhelm you. It's designed to unfold gradually. We often think luck is something mystical, random, gifted by fate. But there is an experiment that shows something very different. People we call lucky share specific cognitive patterns, and most importantly, these patterns can be developed. To understand this better, we first need to talk about how our brain works. The human brain was never designed to perceive reality accurately. Its primary task was different: to help us survive. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors lived in a world where almost everything was unpredictable. The weather changed without warning, predators appeared suddenly, illnesses came out of nowhere, and random encounters could mean either survival or death. In such an environment, the brain could not control most events, so it searched not for truth, but for simple explanations. When something good happened without an obvious reason, it was easier to say, "I was lucky." When something bad happened, unlucky. These words did not explain reality, but they reduced tension. They allowed the mind to quickly close the question and avoid wasting precious energy trying to understand chaos. From an evolutionary perspective, this was useful. The brain conserved resources and maintained psychological stability. That is why belief in luck is so deeply embedded in human thinking. It is not philosophy and not mysticism. It is an evolutionary mechanism that helped the psyche cope with uncertainty. The brain tolerates the unknown poorly. Uncertainty triggers anxiety, and in the ancient world, anxiety meant danger. So when faced with complex or random chains of events, the brain tries to apply a label: luck, fate, chance. This creates a feeling that everything has become clearer, but it is only an illusion of understanding. When we explain events through luck or misfortune, the brain stops searching for patterns. It stops analyzing which factors actually influence the outcome. And most importantly, it stops noticing where we have any ability to influence things at all. For ancient humans, this didn't matter much. They could not influence the weather, animal migrations, or sudden illness. But in the modern world, things are different. Today, most opportunities do not fall from the sky. They appear through words, people, situations, fleeting signals. They can be noticed or missed. The problem is that our brain continues to operate by old rules. It still wants to believe that luck is an external force, that you either have it or you don't, that it has nothing to do with attention, internal state, or behavior. But this is where the contradiction arises. Because if luck is just randomness, then how we look at the world shouldn't matter. Yet experiments show the opposite. And next, we will see how the brain actually decides what you notice and what remains invisible, even if it was right in front of you. Now, I'll tell you about an experiment by Professor Richard Wiseman. He spent years studying people who seem to always be lucky and those who live as if under a gray cloud. Wiseman's goal wasn't just to understand why this happens, but to identify who are these lucky people, what unites them, and how can an ordinary person become one of them. And closer to the end, we'll do a small practice that will allow you to experience this state yourself, not theoretically, but literally feel it in your own perception. Professor Wiseman gathered hundreds of participants and gave them an absolutely simple task: to count the number of photographs in a newspaper. No trick, at least at first glance. But on the second page, in huge letters, it said, "Stop counting. There are 43 photographs. Tell the experimenter, and you will receive 250 pounds. It would seem impossible not to notice such a line. But people split almost instantly. Some, the lucky ones, noticed it right away. Others didn't lift their eyes at all. They were looking at the page, but they did not see it. Wiseman realized that luck isn't a mystical phenomenon. It's a cognitive one. And here is where the scientific explanation begins. Our brain operates in two key modes. In the first, the tunnel attention mode, a person becomes narrow-focused, tense, absorbed only in the task or in their worries. Their perceptual field narrows, and the brain stops registering anything outside that inner tension. In this state, even obvious things go unnoticed. In the second mode, the brain works more broadly. The person is relaxed, calmer, more receptive to external stimuli. This is called the diffuse or expanded attention mode. Neuroscience explains this through something called the reticular activating system, a network in the brainstem that decides what information reaches your conscious awareness. Every second, your brain receives millions of signals. The RAS filters most of them out and shows you only what it considers important. When you are anxious or overly focused, the system prioritizes threats and problems. But when you are calm and open, it starts highlighting opportunities, people, ideas, and coincidences. In other words, the world doesn't change, the filter does. And as Wiseman's experiments showed, this mode is much more active in people we call lucky. Psychologists call this selective attention bias. When we believe we are unlucky, the brain unconsciously searches for evidence to confirm it and ignores everything that contradicts it. Lucky people do the opposite. They don't fixate on failure, so their attention remains flexible and exploratory. You've seen this in real life. At a work meeting, a boss quietly says, almost casually, "If someone wants to take on a small project, come see me afterward." Most people treat it as background noise, but one person hears not just the words, but the tone. It's an opportunity. They ask for details. A few weeks later, they're being considered for a promotion. Another person, sitting right beside them, was too lost in thought to register the signal. Later they say, "Of course he got lucky." The same happens in personal life. At a party, someone lightly mentions, "We're forming a volunteer group, we need people." One person ignores it as noise. Another recognizes a chance. They ask a question, go to a meeting, meet new people. Soon, they have a new circle, new events, new projects. The second person later wonders why others have friends and he doesn't, but the opportunity was right there. Even in relationships, two women go to the same cafes, exhibitions, events, but one walks in openly, picking up tiny social cues, responding, smiling. These micro moments lead to conversations. The other always looks at her phone. She doesn't even see the people who look at her. Later she says, "I never meet anyone." But the world is the same, only perception differs. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. Expectation shapes attention. Attention shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Control is one of the key concepts through which the brain processes reality. Not objective control, but the sense of control. It is this feeling that determines how a person explains events, makes decisions, and responds to uncertainty. In psychology, there is a clear term for this: locus of control. It describes where a person tends to place the source of what happens in their life, outside themselves or within. People with an external locus of control interpret events as the result of circumstances, chance, other people, systems, luck, or bad luck. For them, causality is placed outside their own influence. People with an internal locus of control, on the contrary, tend to look for cause and effect relationships between their actions and outcomes, even when those relationships are not always obvious. This is not about responsibility or blame. It is about the direction of attention. Experimental research shows that with an external locus of control, attention is predominantly fixed on factors that cannot be changed. This reduces cognitive motivation to analyze alternative strategies. The brain stops scanning the environment for points of influence because it assumes by default that they are insignificant. In the studies of Julian Rotter, who introduced the term locus of control, participants with a pronounced external locus more often demonstrated passive behavioral strategies under conditions of uncertainty. They gave up on problem solving more quickly when they encountered initial difficulties, even when alternative courses of action objectively existed. At the same time, subjectively, Such people more often describe their lives as dependent on luck or bad luck, not because events were actually more random, but because their cognitive model of the world did not include an active search for patterns. In contrast, participants with an internal locus of control showed a different pattern. Even after failure, they continued to analyze the situation, change their approach, and test new hypotheses. Their attention remained focused not on the fact of failure itself, but on the structure of the process. Interestingly, in experiments with identical external conditions, differences in outcomes were often explained not by intelligence or skills, but by where a person directed their cognitive resources, toward explaining the cause or toward finding a point of intervention. This is well illustrated by the classic effect of learned helplessness. When a subject repeatedly encounters situations in which their actions do not change the outcome, the brain begins to generalize this experience. An expectation of lack of control is formed. Later, even in conditions where control is objectively possible, attention to these possibilities sharply decreases. At the same time, the reverse process also works. When a person regularly notices a link between action and consequence, even a minimal one, the brain begins to amplify exploratory activity. Sensitivity to weak signals, secondary opportunities, and indirect paths increases. It is important to emphasize, this does not mean that people with an internal locus of control everything. They simply encode uncertainty differently. For them, uncertainty is not the absence of control, but an unfilled space for analysis. Two people can find themselves in exactly the same situation. One explains what is happening through external circumstances and stops looking for options. The other searches for a point, however small, where influence is possible. Both live in the same world, but their perceptual filters work differently. And that is why, for one person, it looks like bad luck, while for another, it appears as a series of opportunities that have not yet been realized. In the context of luck, this is fundamentally important, because luck, as we will see next, most often arises not where there is complete control, but where attention remains active under conditions of uncertainty. In most cases, what people call luck has a social nature. Jobs, money, relationships, access to information, recommendations, all of this passes through other people. That is why there is an entire body of scientific research explaining why some people systematically end up in the right, social situations, while others do not. In neurobiology and social psychology, this is linked to the concept of social signal exchange. A person constantly transmits micro-signals to others through facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, speech tempo, and gaze direction. These signals are processed by other people automatically, without conscious analysis, via subcortical brain structures. A key role here is played by the amygdala and its associated threat and safety assessment networks. Within fractions of a second, another person's brain makes a decision. Is this individual safe? Are they predictable? Is it worth continuing interaction? This happens long before rational thinking comes online. Research shows that people in a state of chronic stress or anxiety transmit more threat signals, increased muscle tension, constricted facial expressions, sharp movements, unstable eye contact. These signals are not consciously noticed, but they activate defensive responses in the other person. As a result, the interaction becomes shorter, more formal, and less productive. By contrast, states associated with activation of the parasympathetic nervous system are accompanied by different markers: relaxed facial muscles, smooth movements, lower vocal variability, steady but non-intrusive eye contact. These signals are interpreted by another person's brain as indicators of safety. In social neuroscience, this is called the effect of affiliative availability, the tendency of people to be more open, helpful, and generous toward those who do not trigger latent anxiety in them. This is not sympathy or empathy in the everyday sense. It is a basic neurophysiological response. It has been experimentally confirmed that participants in a calm physiological state receive help from strangers more often, get positive responses to requests more frequently, and are more often perceived as reliable. Even when the content of their speech is identical, their ideas are supported more readily, and their proposals are less likely to be rejected at an early stage. From the observer's perspective, this looks like a natural flow of events, but from a mechanistic standpoint, it is the result of social filtering processes. Of particular interest is the phenomenon of social mirroring. People unconsciously copy each other's microstates. A calm person lowers the level of arousal in a group. A tense person raises it. That is why the same individual can receive fundamentally different reactions from others, depending on their internal state, even without intentionally changing their words or behavior. Over time, this creates a cumulative effect. A person whose state is consistently perceived as safe is more often included in informal conversations, gains access to unofficial information, and hears about opportunities earlier than others. These micro-events are rarely perceived as significant, yet they are precisely what later gets described by the word luck. Outwardly, everything looks random: a meeting, a conversation, an offer, a coincidence. But when viewed as a system, it becomes clear. Social luck is not a series of fortunate accidents, but a byproduct of a stable physiological and perceptual state. That is why two people can exist in the same environment, work in the same company, visit the same places, and yet one consistently ends up at the center of opportunities, while the other remains on the periphery. The difference is not in others' intentions and not in hidden advantages. The difference lies in which signals are being read from their presence. From the perspective of other people's brains, one is a source of additional uncertainty, the other is a source of stability, and the choice is made automatically. In the context of luck, this is critically important, because most opportunities appear not when a person actively searches for them, but when other people perceive interaction with them as safe and worthwhile. And next, we will see why anxiety and tension do not merely worsen well-being, but literally shut down access to these social channels. Anxiety is not just an emotional state. It is a physiological mode in which the brain and body operate by different rules. When a person experiences chronic tension, the nervous system reorganizes priorities of perception, attention, and behavior. And this is where a systemic blockage of what later gets called luck begins. From a neurobiological perspective, anxiety is associated with dominance of the sympathetic nervous system. This is a mobilization mode activated in response to threat. Heart rate increases, muscle tone rises, peripheral vision narrows, and breathing patterns change. All of these are adaptive reactions designed for short-term survival. The problem arises when this mode becomes chronic. Under sympathetic dominance, the brain reallocates resources. Activity increases in structures responsible for threat detection, primarily the amygdala and its associated networks. At the same time, functional flexibility of the prefrontal cortex decreases, the area involved in evaluating alternatives, long-term planning, and integrating complex information. Simply put, an anxious brain is worse at analyzing options and worse at noticing indirect opportunities. Experimental data show that elevated cortisol levels reduce the ability to distribute attention broadly. The perceptual field narrows. The brain begins to prioritize signals related to potential danger and ignore neutral or weakly expressed stimuli, precisely the stimuli from which opportunities are normally formed. This is clearly seen in tasks involving peripheral perception. Participants in a stress state are significantly worse at detecting changes outside the central focus of attention, even when those changes are visually noticeable. The information is present, but it does not pass the relevance filter. This is not a matter of intelligence or experience. It is a matter of the system's operating mode. When a person is anxious, the brain follows a simple principle. This is not the time for something new. Right now, the priority is not to make a mistake. In this configuration, any uncertainty is interpreted as a potential threat rather than a source of opportunity. An additional effect is behavioral. In a state of anxiety, behavioral variability decreases. A person relies more often on familiar, proven strategies and experiments less with new ones. This reduces the probability of accidental but beneficial deviations. the very moments that are later perceived as lucky coincidences. From a statistical standpoint, this is critical. The fewer behavioral options there are, the fewer chances for an unexpected positive outcome. Anxiety does not make the world less favorable, it makes behavior narrower. On the opposite side is the parasympathetic nervous system, the mode of recovery and safety. In this state, cortisol levels decrease, breathing normalizes, and the perceptual field expands. Prefrontal cortex activity becomes more stable, enhancing the ability to integrate information and evaluate weak signals. In this mode, the brain encodes uncertainty differently. It no longer automatically associates it with threat. This does not mean the absence of risk. It means that risk no longer blocks exploration. It is in this state that a person more often notices indirect connections, casual remarks, changes in other people's behavior, and non-obvious courses of action, because perceptual filters are no longer excessively rigid. Over time, this systematically leads to calm individuals ending up in a greater number of situations with potential positive outcomes. From the outside, this looks like luck, but at the mechanistic level, it is simply the result of a broader range of perception and behavior. Thus, anxiety does not ruin fate or repel luck. It makes the nervous system less sensitive to opportunities. And as long as this state persists, no intentions, beliefs, or efforts can compensate for the physiological narrowing of perception. That is why the next step is not a change in thinking, but a change in state. Because without it, the brain simply does not see what is already within the field of its reality. If we consider luck not as an event, but as a byproduct of how the nervous system and attention function, a logical question arises. Can this state be trained? Not attracted, not visualized, but formed as a stable skill. From the perspective of neuroscience, the answer is yes, but not directly. Luck is not a separate function of the brain. It emerges at the intersection of three levels: physiological state, cognitive tuning, and behavioral variability. Changing any one of them in isolation produces a weak effect. Changing all three produces a stable one. The first level is physiological. The nervous system must regularly return to a state in which perception is not constricted. This is not about relaxation as a goal, but about restoring balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. Breathing patterns, reduction of muscle tension, slowing of rhythm. All of this directly affects how the brain's sensory filters operate. If this level is ignored, further work is ineffective. Attention simply does not expand. The second level is cognitive. The brain constantly forms expectations. These expectations are not consciously recognized, but they determine which signals are considered meaningful. If the default expectation is lack of control or a low probability of a positive outcome, attention automatically shifts toward confirming that scenario. Training at this level is not about positive thinking, but about consistently maintaining an open expectation. Not everything will work out, but I don't know what exactly will work. This reduces the rigidity of the relevance filter. The third level is behavioral. Even with an optimal state and open attention, luck does not manifest without sufficient interaction with reality. Here, the key parameter is behavioral variability. The more micro-actions there are, the higher the probability of indirect effects. This is not about risk, but about diversity. Small deviations from habitual patterns dramatically expand the space of possible outcomes. Neuroplasticity plays a unifying role here. Repeated states and behavioral patterns strengthen the corresponding neural circuits. If a person regularly operates in a mode where perception is expanded, expectations are flexible, and behavior is not fixed, the brain begins to treat this as the norm. Scanning for opportunities becomes automatic rather than effortful. It is important to understand that training luck does not produce immediate results, because what changes is not a single event, but the statistics of events. The effect appears not as a sudden turn, but as a gradual increase in the number of situations in which a positive outcome is possible. From the outside, this looks like a series of coincidences, but from a systems perspective, it is simply an increase in the number of entry points, more contacts, more signals, more chances for combinations that previously never occurred. That is why attempts to force luck usually do not work. Forcing increases control and tension, and that narrows perception. Luck does not grow through effort. It emerges as a side effect of the system being configured correctly. Ultimately, luck is not something that comes from outside. It is something that becomes visible when attention, state, and behavior stop working against each other. And when this configuration becomes stable, the very feeling of randomness disappears. What remains is simply a sequence of events that previously never entered the field of perception. So let's move from explanation to experience. We'll do a short practice so you can notice this shift directly. When you slow your breathing and relax your body, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the state associated with safety, openness, and social perception. In this state, the brain literally widens its field of awareness. That's why opportunities are easier to notice when you are calm. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath and slowly exhale. Imagine walking through life slightly calmer than usual. And suddenly everything begins to unfold softly and at the right time. As if the world adjusts to your rhythm. As if someone invisible clears your path. Now repeat silently. I am open to opportunities. I notice the good at the right moment. My attention remains open. I respond to subtle signals. Luck moves toward me. I am a person who attracts luck. Take another deep breath and open your eyes. That inner lightness is the state of a lucky person. Repeating this state matters. Thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain strengthens the circuits it uses most often. When openness becomes familiar, noticing opportunities becomes automatic. Repeat these phrases before important events, meetings, or the start of your day. You will feel the difference. In the coming days, don't expect miracles. Expect small coincidences, words, thoughts, needed people. Luck appears quietly and comes where it is ready to be noticed. Write in the comments, what small sign of luck happened to you today or recently? Let this space become a place where everyone can draw inspiration from each other. Make sure your notifications are on. More practices are coming. And remember, luck doesn't search for people. It searches for attention. And right now, your attention is already tuned correctly.